Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode where we dive into the ups and downs of learning English. Today, we're talking about something every learner experiences struggles. If you've ever felt stuck, frustrated, or even ready to give up, trust me, you're not alone.
Absolutely. Learning English can feel overwhelming at times. Maybe you understand grammar, but struggle with speaking. Or perhaps you get nervous when listening to native speakers. Whatever your challenge is, we're here to remind you it's completely normal.
One of the biggest struggles I hear from learners is the fear of making mistakes. People worrying about sounding silly or using the wrong words. But honestly, mistakes are a natural part of learning. Even native speakers make them.
Exactly. And another common challenge is understanding different accents. You might be comfortable with one accent, like American or British, but then you hear someone from Australia or Scotland, and suddenly, it feels like a whole new language. That's totally normal. The key is exposure. Listen to different accents as much as possible.
That's a great point. And speaking of exposure, a lot of learners feel frustrated because they know a lot of vocabulary but can't seem to form sentences quickly. This happens because their brain is still translating from their native language. The best way to overcome this is to start thinking in English. Describe what you're doing in English, even if it's just in your head.
Yes, and don't forget the importance of consistency. Many learners struggle because they study for a few weeks and then stop. It's better to practice a little every day rather than cramming once a week. Even just 10 minutes of listening or speaking daily can make a huge difference.
Absolutely, and let's not forget the emotional side of learning a language. It can feel discouraging when you don't see progress right away, but remember, every small step counts. One day, you'll look back and realize how far you've come.
That's so true, and I think social pressure makes it even harder. Many learners feel embarrassed speaking English because they're afraid of being judged. But here's the thing: most people don't care if you make mistakes. They just appreciate the effort. In fact, many native speakers admire people who learn multiple languages because they know how difficult it is.
Yes, and sometimes the people around us, friends, family, or even teachers, can unintentionally discourage us. Maybe they correct every little mistake, or they say, "Your accent sounds funny." That can really hurt confidence, but don't let it stop you. Learning a language isn't about being perfect, it's about communicating.
Exactly. And speaking of confidence, one of the best ways to build it is by speaking more. Even if you're not in an English-speaking country, find ways to practice. Join online communities, do language exchanges, or even talk to yourself in English. The more you use the language, the more natural it becomes.
Right, and another struggle many learners face is listening. English speakers talk fast, they use slang, and they don't always pronounce words the way they're written. The best way to improve: listen to real conversations, podcasts, movies, interviews without subtitles first, then check if you understood correctly.
And don't stress too much about understanding every single word. Focus on the general meaning first. Over time, your brain will naturally start recognizing patterns, and understanding will become easier.
Exactly, and if there's one thing I want every learner to remember, it's this: you're not alone in your struggles. Every English learner has been through the same challenges. Keep going, keep practicing, and trust that you're improving every day.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about grammar struggles. English grammar can be tricky because there are so many exceptions. For example, past tense verbs follow the regular pattern, like walk becoming walked. But then you have irregular verbs like go becoming went. It doesn't always make sense.
Yeah, and phrasal verbs are another nightmare for many learners. Think about give up. It doesn't mean giving something to someone, it means to quit. Or look up, which can mean searching for information, but also physically looking at something above you. The best way to learn these is in context.
Right. Instead of memorizing long grammar rules, pay attention to how native speakers use these words. Listen to real conversations, read books, or even watch TV shows. The more exposure you get, the more natural it will feel.
And speaking of natural, pronunciation is another big challenge. English has so many silent letters. Why is there a K in no, or a GH in though? No wonder learners get frustrated.
Yeah, and sometimes two words look similar but sound completely different, like tough and though. The best trick: listen and repeat. Shadowing is a great technique. Listen to native speakers and try to imitate them.
Exactly, and let's not forget spelling. English spelling is so inconsistent. Read and read are spelled the same but pronounced differently depending on the tense. It's crazy.
That's why I always recommend reading out loud. When you read aloud, you train your brain to connect the spelling with the sound. It really helps with pronunciation and fluency at the same time.
That's a great tip. And one more thing, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a step towards improvement. If you wait until you're perfect, you'll never start speaking. The key is to practice, stay consistent, and enjoy the process.
That's so true. I've met so many learners who are afraid of making mistakes, so they avoid speaking altogether. But guess what? Even native speakers make mistakes all the time. The difference is, they don't let it stop them.
Exactly. Think about little kids when they learn to speak. They make tons of mistakes, but they just keep going, and eventually, they get it right. Adults should do the same. The more you speak, the better you'll get.
And that brings us to another common struggle thinking in English. A lot of learners translate everything in their heads before speaking, which slows them down.
Right, but the trick is to start small. Label things around you in English, talk to yourself in English, or even describe your day in your head. It helps you get used to forming sentences naturally without relying on your native language.
I love that. And another way to stop overthinking is to focus on communication rather than perfection. The goal is to be understood, not to have flawless grammar.
Yes, if you can communicate your ideas, you're already succeeding. And honestly, people are usually kind and patient if they see you're making an effort. No one expects you to sound like Shakespeare.
Exactly. And another thing that helps is immersing yourself in English as much as possible. Listen to English music, watch movies, read books, or even change the language on your phone. The more English you surround yourself with, the faster you'll improve.
And if you can, practice with real people. Join a language exchange, find a speaking partner, or even record yourself speaking and listen back. It's a great way to track your progress.
Absolutely. Learning English is a journey, and it's okay to struggle along the way. What matters is that you keep going.
Yes, and one more thing, don't compare yourself to others. Everyone learns at their own pace. Some people might pick up pronunciation quickly, while others might excel at vocabulary. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
So true. Comparing yourself to others can be discouraging. Instead, focus on your own progress. Look back at where you started and see how much you've improved. Even small steps forward are still progress.
And speaking of progress, celebrating little victories is important. Maybe today you understood a full conversation in English, or you learned a new phrase and used it in a sentence. Those moments matter.
100%. Learning a language isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. So, don't give up. Keep pushing forward, keep speaking, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
Exactly. And another thing, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are proof that you're trying, and every mistake is a learning opportunity.
Right. I've noticed that people who are afraid of making mistakes end up speaking less, and that slows down their progress. The more you speak, the faster you'll improve.
And let's not forget the importance of listening. If you want to speak English naturally, you need to listen to native speakers as much as possible. Podcasts, movies, audiobooks, these are all great ways to absorb the language.
Absolutely. And don't just listen passively, try to repeat what you hear. Shadowing is a great technique where you mimic native speakers. It helps with pronunciation, rhythm, and even confidence.
That's a fantastic tip. Plus, if you surround yourself with English daily, even in small ways, it will start to feel more natural. Changing your phone settings to English, thinking in English, and even talking to yourself in English can make a big difference.
Yes, English should become a part of your daily life, not just something you study for an hour and then forget about. The more you immerse yourself, the easier it gets.
Exactly. And speaking of immersion, another great way to make English a part of your daily life is by engaging with real-life content. Read news articles, follow English-speaking influencers, or even join online forums where discussions happen in English. That's a great idea. And if you're into social media, follow accounts that post in English. That way, your brain gets used to seeing and processing the language naturally. Oh, and one more thing, don't get too caught up in grammar rules. Yes, grammar is important, but if you focus too much on being perfect, you might hesitate to speak at all. The key is to communicate.
100%. Native speakers make grammar mistakes all the time, but that doesn't stop them from speaking. Fluency is about being understood, not about being perfect.
And confidence plays a huge role. If you believe in yourself, you'll be more likely to speak up, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
Right. Confidence is built through practice. The more you put yourself in situations where you have to use English, the easier it gets.
So, if you're struggling with English, just remember you're not alone. Keep going, keep practicing, and soon, you'll see progress.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Sometimes the best way to improve is by putting yourself in situations where you have no choice but to speak English.
Like traveling to an English-speaking country, or even just joining a local language exchange group. Being surrounded by the language forces you to think in English, and that's where real growth happens.
And even if traveling isn't an option, you can still create that environment at home. Change your phone's language settings to English, watch movies without subtitles, and even try talking to yourself in English. It might feel silly at first, but it really works.
Oh, totally. And here's something fun: try narrating your day in English. For example, when you wake up, say, "I'm getting out of bed. Now I'm making coffee." It's a simple trick, but it helps you start thinking in English naturally.
That's a great tip. And don't forget to celebrate small wins. Maybe today you understood a full conversation without translating in your head, or you ordered food in English confidently. Those moments matter.
Exactly. Progress isn't always about speaking perfectly. It's about feeling more comfortable with the language every single day.
Right. And another thing, don't stress too much about grammar. When you're trying to think in English, focusing too much on getting every sentence grammatically perfect can actually slow you down.
Yeah, native speakers make mistakes all the time. What's more important is fluency and confidence. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, you'll hesitate, and that makes it harder to think in English naturally.
Exactly. A good trick is to simplify your sentences. Instead of thinking, how do I form this complicated sentence perfectly? Just go for the easiest way to express your idea.
And sometimes, finding patterns in the language helps too. Like, instead of memorizing random words, learn phrases and sentence structures that you use often. That way, your brain starts recognizing them automatically.
Yeah, it's like muscle memory for your brain. If you practice saying, "Can I have a coffee, please?" enough times, it just becomes second nature instead of something you have to translate word by word.
Oh, and speaking of practice, shadowing is a great way to train your brain to think in English. Just listen to native speakers and repeat exactly what they say, mimicking their tone and speed.
That's such an effective technique. You are not only improving your pronunciation, but also getting used to how English sounds naturally, which helps you think faster in the language.
And the best part, the more you practice these little habits, the less you'll need to translate in your head. One day, you'll just realize, boom, you're thinking in English without even trying.
Exactly. And remember, thinking in English isn't something that happens overnight. It takes time, consistency, and a bit of patience with yourself.
Right. But if you keep practicing, immersing yourself, and staying confident, you'll get there. And once you do, speaking English will feel so much more natural.
So, don't stress, keep going, and most importantly, have fun with it.
That's it for today. Keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye for now.
Bye.